The morning sun glowed gold over Umoja International Academy, casting long shadows across the schoolyard. A woman in a simple Ankara dress approached the gate, her sandals dusty from the red earth. The guard eyed her with suspicion. "Cleaners use the back," he said. She smiled faintly, her eyes calm yet knowing. Moments later, a sleek black Prado pulled in. The board chair stepped out and froze. He hurried forward, bowing his head. "Dr. Amaranjeri, welcome home." The guard's jaw dropped. Phones started recording, and by sunset, the academy would never be the same again. The smell of rain still lingered over Nairobi's air that morning, mingling with the sweetness of blooming jacarandas. Umoja International Academy stood proud on a hilltop, glass walls, marble floors, and manicured lawns that whispered wealth. It was the school where ministers' children, expatriates, and young elites came to learn. But beneath its polish, a silent rot had begun to spread, a hierarchy not written on paper but carved into hearts. At 6:45 a.m., Kofi Mensah, the senior security guard from Ghana, adjusted his cap and leaned against the gate. He had worked there 7 years, long enough to know who deserved a smile and who got the nod. The rules were unspoken, but everyone understood them. As the first staff arrived, he greeted each politely. "Good morning, Madam Rose." Rose Wanjiku, the receptionist, breezed past in heels, perfume trailing. "Good morning, Kofi. Remember, visitors for the board must sign here, not on the casual list." She pointed to a separate column in the logbook marked VIP. Kofi nodded, hiding the sting. "Of course, madam." Moments later, a woman appeared at the curve of the road. She walked slowly, gracefully, her Ankara dress faded but clean, her brown leather bag weathered from years of use. The way she looked at the school, eyes glimmering with nostalgia and pride, it was as if she carried memories in her steps. When she reached the gate, she smiled warmly. "Good morning, my brother." Kofi returned a cautious nod. "Good morning, madam." "Are you here to see someone?" She chuckled lightly. "You could say that." He frowned. "Cleaners report by 8, madam. The main offices are not open yet." Before she could respond, Rose's voice rang from across the courtyard. "Kofi, please. Cleaners and suppliers use the back entrance." The woman tilted her head slightly. Her smile didn't fade. "Is that the rule for everyone who walks on foot?" Rose didn't answer. Parents were beginning to arrive. Appearances had to be maintained. Peter Mulewa, the deputy head teacher, stepped out of his car, adjusting his tie. He looked at the woman, puzzled. "Madam, you are early. Cleaning can wait until after assembly." The woman nodded slowly. "I see." Her voice was calm, too calm. Rose crossed her arms. "You people must learn to respect protocol. The principal doesn't even like seeing workers near the front gate." Just then, a black Prado rolled to a stop at the gate. The driver jumped out and opened the door for Honar Benson Olwach, the board chair. Tall, silver-haired, commanding respect with every gesture. Everyone straightened their posture. Kofi saluted. Rose adjusted her blouse. But Benson froze when he saw the woman. His face softened, his eyes wide with disbelief. He stepped forward quickly and bowed slightly, something no one had ever seen him do. "Dr. Amaranjeri," he said softly. "Welcome home." A heavy silence swept across the courtyard. Rose's hands trembled. Kofi's pen slipped from his grip. Peter stared, pale and speechless. The woman finally spoke, her voice now carrying authority that filled the morning air. "So this is how you welcome your principal?" Phones were raised. Students whispered. The crowd thickened. Amara's gaze moved gently from Rose to Kofi, then to Peter. "Interesting. 1 year away, and already we've forgotten the meaning of Umoja, unity." Benson cleared his throat nervously. "Staff meeting, immediately." As they entered the hall, Kofi's hands still shook. The woman he had just ordered to use the back gate was now the head of the institution, and the founder of the very academy whose gates he guarded. Inside the main hall, whispers darted like bees. Is she really the principal? She looked so simple. How could they not know? Amara walked through the murmuring crowd with quiet dignity. Each step echoed against marble floors that suddenly seemed cold. She paused before the podium and looked at the school emblem, a dove encircled by the motto, "Knowledge with Honor." Her lips curved into a faint, ironic smile. "Let's see," she murmured to herself, "if honor still lives here." The assembly hall buzzed like a restless hive. Teachers exchanged uneasy glances. Students whispered behind their palms. Some secretly recorded on their phones, while others pretended to scroll, not wanting to miss history in the making. At the center of the chaos stood Dr. Amara Njeri, calm, graceful yet powerful as thunder held in silence. Her plain Ankara dress seemed to defy the marble podium and golden curtains behind her. Hanyar Benson-Oloch, still uneasy, cleared his throat into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, staff and students of Umoja International Academy," he began, his voice shaking. "Allow me to reintroduce our returning principal and co-founder, Dr. Amara Njeri." The hall erupted in gasps and murmurs. Rose's mouth fell open. Peter adjusted his glasses nervously, trying to piece together what was happening. Kofi stood near the back, eyes lowered, his heart pounding with guilt. Amara raised a hand gently, and the hall fell silent. Her voice carried a calm authority that could silence the wind. "When I founded Umoja, I had a dream, a school where respect walked before knowledge, where a janitor and a CEO could share a meal without shame. But today I saw something different. I saw fear in the eyes of a man who guards our gate, and pride in the faces of those meant to protect our values." The words hung heavy in the air. Rose shifted uncomfortably, her hands trembling. Peter tried to look composed but failed. Sweat traced a line down his temple. Amara turned to the large projector screen behind her. "Let's watch something together." Benson frowned. "What do you mean, Doctor?" She nodded toward the AV technician. "Roll the security footage from this morning, the main gate camera." A collective murmur rippled through the hall. The lights dimmed. On screen, the footage played. Amara walking up to the gate. Kofi hesitating. Rose shouting. Peter waving his hand dismissively. Every word echoed across the hall. Students gasped. Teachers looked down in shame. When the video ended, silence reigned. The only sound was the hum of the projector fan. Amara stepped forward, voice still measured. "You see, I didn't come unannounced to embarrass anyone. I came to test something invisible, the culture of this place, and what I found was worse than failure. I found that dignity has become selective." A few students clapped hesitantly, then stopped, unsure if it was allowed. Peter finally spoke, forcing a polite smile. "Doctor, with all due respect, we didn't recognize you. It was just a misunderstanding." Amara cut in softly. "Ah, you didn't recognize respect either, Mr. Mulewa. It's strange how we only see value when it wears a title." The hall stirred again. A teacher at the back whispered, She's right." Rose stepped forward suddenly, voice trembling. "Dr. Njeri, I didn't mean to disrespect you. It was protocol. We have instructions about the front gate and—" Amara looked at her kindly but firmly. "Protocol should never replace humanity, my dear. If the rule makes you blind to kindness, it's not a rule. It's a chain." Rose's eyes welled up. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Kofi stepped forward next, removing his cap, his voice thick with emotion. "Madam, I am ashamed. I feared losing my job. I should have questioned it. I didn't." Amara placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "No, Kofi, you did not fail alone. You live in a system that taught you fear is safer than courage. But today we begin to unlearn that." She turned back to the audience. "Let me tell you something my grandmother used to say in Embu. When you see a man kneeling to drink from the river, remember, the river does not care who kneels first. Respect is not earned by title, but by how we treat one another." The hall erupted in quiet amens and murmurs of agreement. Amara continued, "I will not suspend anyone today. Instead, I am calling for a truth assembly. Right here, right now. Every staff member who has ever been mistreated, speak. Students too, speak. Tell me what you see when you walk through these halls." Benson's eyes widened. "Doctor, perhaps we should—" She interrupted, her tone still calm but immovable. "Mr. Chairman, you asked me to revive the spirit of Umoja. This is what revival looks like." A teacher raised her hand timidly. "Dr. Njeri, last year I was denied permission to attend my father's funeral because it fell during exams week. The deputy said it would set a bad example." All eyes turned to Peter. He swallowed hard. A janitor in the back spoke next. "We clean your offices at night, but no one greets us in the morning. We are invisible here." A murmur of guilt spread among the teachers. A student stood up, tall, brave, voice clear. "Madam Principal, last month I saw a cleaner's daughter being mocked by other students because she wore a torn uniform. No one said—" "Madam, for you." "Thank you, Kofi." He sat beside her, the quiet hum of Nairobi night settling around them. "You know," he said, "what you did today? I've never seen a boss sit among workers and listen like that." Amara sipped her tea. "Then today you've seen leadership, not a boss." He nodded slowly. "Do you think they'll change, madam?" She looked toward the school buildings glowing softly in the dark. "Change is a seed, Kofi. You don't dig it up to check if it's growing. You water it with patience." Kofi smiled faintly. "You speak like my grandmother." Amara laughed lightly. "Then she must be a wise woman." Montage sequence Rose reorganizes the reception desk, greeting a cleaner with a smile. Peter led a class discussion on empathy, writing on the board, "Respect is the highest form of intelligence." Kofi opens the gate in the morning, smiling as he says, "Mgeni wa heshima," to each person. Students sweeping the courtyard with teachers on service Saturday, Amara wrote in her journal at night, "Transformation does not begin in the boardroom. It begins at the gate." In a world that worships titles and cars, a woman in an Ankara dress taught an entire school that greatness begins with humility. And as Umoja's gates opened each morning, so did its people's hearts. It began with a single video, the short clip of the gate confrontation, Kofi's hesitation, Rose's scolding, and the shocking moment when the maid revealed herself to be the principal, went viral overnight. By morning, hashtags were everywhere. The principal, at the gate, Umoja reborn, Respect for All radio hosts debated it. TV anchors replayed it. Even the Ministry of Education issued a cautious statement praising the values of humility and equity demonstrated by Dr. Amara Njeri. Within days, news vans lined the front gate of Umoja International Academy, the same gate that had once shut its heart. On Monday morning, Amara arrived early, as usual. The air buzzed with energy, journalists, camera drones, reporters shouting questions. "Dr. Amara, what message do you have for African women in leadership? Do you plan to enter politics? Will you expand the Umoja model across the country?" Amara raised her hand gently. "My only message," she said softly, "is that respect is not earned by titles, but by truth. Let's keep our gates open, in spirit." The cameras clicked furiously. Behind her, Kofi was struggling to control the crowd. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Madam," he whispered, smiling, "even the famous now come through the same gate." Amara chuckled. "Let them. Perhaps they'll learn something here." Inside, the students were restless. They had seen their school on TV. Some felt proud, others curious, a few jealous. Rose, now the community liaison officer, organized the flow of visitors. "We have a request from BBC Africa and another from the Nairobi Chronicle. They want to film your class," she said. Amara sighed. "We are not a show, Rose. We are a lesson. Let them watch but not perform for us." Fame has a strange taste. Sweet at first, then bitter if swallowed too fast. Soon, invitations began pouring in. Keynote speeches, international panels, even a potential UN fellowship. The board celebrated, seeing new prestige and funding. "Dr. Amara," Benson said during a meeting, "you've become a symbol. We can expand Umoja across the region. Branches in Ghana, Rwanda, South Africa. Investors are calling already." Amara smiled politely. "Expansion without essence is noise, Benson. Umoja is not a franchise. It is a spirit." But deep inside, she felt the pull of ambition. She remembered the years of struggle, being dismissed, mocked for her soft leadership. Now the world finally saw her. The applause was intoxicating. That night, as she stood alone in her office, she nodded slowly. "You see, this is not about one morning's mistake. This is a disease of the heart, and until we face it, we can't call ourselves educators." She paused, letting silence deepen, the kind of silence that forces reflection. Rose wiped her tears openly now. Peter's shoulders slumped. The facade was gone. Kofi stood tall again, as if finally freed from a hidden weight. Amara walked to the center of the stage and spoke softly, almost like a prayer. "Today is not a day of punishment. It is a day of remembrance, to remind us that Umoja means unity, not uniformity. That we rise by lifting others, not by looking down on them." Benson stood, nodding gravely. "Dr. Njeri, I believe you have awakened something in us. What do you propose we do next? Amara turned toward him, her eyes resolute. We start with the truth, then humility, then training. Not just for teachers and guards, but for every soul in this academy. We will build a new code of respect, signed by every hand that works or studies here. The hall erupted in applause, hesitant at first, then rising like a wave. For the first time in years, the school felt alive. Amara smiled faintly, whispering under her breath, "Now, the real work begins." The courtyard was empty, the sky now painted in orange and indigo. Amara stood alone by the gate where it had all begun. Kofi approached quietly, cap in hand. "Madam, may I ask a question?" She nodded. He hesitated. "When you came this morning, you knew what would happen?" A small smile. "Not exactly, but I knew the gate would speak truth. Gates always do. They show us who we are when no one is watching." Kofi exhaled deeply. "May God bless you, madam. Today, we all saw ourselves." She nodded gently. "And that's the beginning of change, my brother." As she turned to leave, a soft breeze rustled through the acacia trees, carrying the faint sound of students singing the school anthem from a distant classroom. The words floated on the air, knowledge with honor, Umoja forever. Amara closed her eyes for a moment, whispering, "Let it be true again." The camera pans upward to the glowing school sign, Umoja International Academy, knowledge with honor. The lights flicker briefly, then shine brighter than before. The next morning, a message spread across Umoja International Academy like wildfire. All staff, students, and parents are to gather at the assembly hall by 10 a.m., mandatory attendance. By 9:45, the hall was packed. Even the janitors, cooks, and drivers stood at the back, whispering nervously. The air carried the scent of chalk, perfume, and quiet fear. On the stage sat Dr. Amara Njeri, serene yet firm. Beside her, Hanru Benson Oluwak watched closely, half proud, half anxious. The Kenyan flag hung behind them, sunlight filtering through its colors, painting streaks of red, black, and green across the polished floor. Amara stood slowly, letting her silence command attention before a single word left her lips. "Yesterday," she began softly. "A moment at the gate exposed a sickness that has been hiding among us. A sickness of pride, of class, of forgetting who we are." The hall went still, but in Africa, when one child in the homestead misbehaves, the elders do not banish the child. They call a meeting under the tree, they listen, they correct, and they heal. She looked around, her gaze sweeping through faces of guilt and curiosity. "Today, we sit under that tree." A quiet murmur rose, then faded. At Amara's signal, 2 students entered carrying a carved wooden stool, the stool of truth, an old Kamba tradition her grandmother had taught her. They placed it at the center of the stage. "Whoever sits on this stool will speak the truth," she said. "No punishment will follow, only learning." Rose Wanjiku was the first to stand. Her hands trembled slightly, but she walked forward with surprising courage. She sat, eyes glistening under the lights. "Dr. Njeri, everyone," she began. "Yesterday I looked at you and saw a cleaner. Because that is what my eyes are trained to see. I thought I was protecting the school's image, but really, I was protecting my own pride. I forgot that this academy's name means unity. I am sorry." Her voice broke. Amara nodded gently. "Thank you, Rose. Truth begins where excuses end." Applause followed. Quiet, respectful, genuine. Next, Kofi Mensah stepped forward, still in his guard's uniform, cap in hand. His deep Ghanaian accent filled the room. "When I first came to Kenya, I thought keeping quiet was the safest way to survive. But silence, I've learned, can also be betrayal. I should have asked questions, but I feared losing my job. I forgot that a guard protects people, not pride. For that, I ask forgiveness." Amara smiled warmly. "My brother, today you have guarded our dignity." The hall erupted in soft applause again. Then came Peter Mulewa, the deputy head teacher. His face was pale, his voice tight with emotion. "Dr. Njeri," he said, bowing slightly, "I've always believed discipline and prestige make a great school, but yesterday showed me something deeper, that fear and arrogance cannot teach values. I failed you. I failed the students. I failed the vision." Amara regarded him quietly. "Mr. Mulewa, there is a proverb from my village, a tree that bends does not break. You have bent. Let that be your beginning." Peter lowered his head, tears threatening to fall. Then Amara turned to the audience. "Now I will speak. She stepped down from the stage and walked among the crowd, her sandals clicking softly on the tile. "I once wore this same uniform you wear," she said to a group of students in the front row. "I was the daughter of a fruit vendor. I cleaned classrooms to pay my school fees. If my teachers had looked down on me, I would never have become who I am. That is why I built this place, not for the rich, but for the hopeful." A hush fell over the room. She turned to the teachers. "You are the mirrors of society. If your reflection is cracked, the nation will see itself broken. Let us fix the mirror together." From the back, a young teacher stood. "Madam Principal, what about the rules? If we remove them, chaos will come." Amara nodded thoughtfully. "Rules are necessary. But remember, a rule without compassion becomes a whip, and a whip cannot grow flowers." The hall murmured with understanding. A student's voice rose suddenly, small, hesitant. "Madam Principal, will people like Rose lose their jobs?" Amara turned to the child, a girl no older than 12. "No, my dear. We don't throw away the broken pot, we mend it. That's how it becomes stronger than before." The girl smiled shyly. Benson rose to speak. "Dr. Njeri, your words move us. But how do we turn this awakening into lasting change?" Amara paused, then gestured toward a large chart behind her, hand-drawn, titled The Umoja Renewal Project. The Umoja Renewal Project Truth. Assemblies every term to allow open dialogue. Respect circles. Daily 5-minute gatherings led by students. Service Saturdays. Teachers. Students and workers clean the compound together. Ethics training for staff with local elders as mentors. Scholarships for workers' children, funded by staff donations. This, Amara said, is how we heal, not by shame, but by shared responsibility. The hall broke into spontaneous applause. Some teachers cried quietly. Even the janitors stood taller. Then, unexpectedly, Kofi raised his hand again. "Madam Principal," he said, "may I speak on behalf of the guards?" Amara nodded. "We will begin our own tradition. Every morning when we open this gate, we will greet each person with one phrase, Mgeni wa heshima." She smiled. "Beautiful. What does it mean for those who don't speak Swahili?" Kofi grinned. "It means honored guest." The crowd cheered softly. Rose stood again, wiping her tears. "And from now on, every visitor who walks in will be offered water and a smile, whether they come in a car or on foot." Amara turned to Peter. "And you, deputy head teacher, what will your new rule be?" He hesitated, then smiled humbly. "From this day, I will start every staff meeting with a proverb, not a warning." Laughter rippled through the hall. Amara nodded approvingly. "Then it is settled. Umoja will no longer be a place of fear. It will be a place of light." Benson stood clapping. "Let it be written in the minutes. Today marks the rebirth of Umoja Academy." The entire hall rose to its feet. The sound of applause was thunderous, echoing through corridors, spilling into classrooms and the courtyard beyond. Outside, the rain clouds rolled in, but no one moved. The students began singing the school anthem again, knowledge with honor. Teachers joined. Then workers. Then even the parents watching from the back. Amara stood at the edge of the stage, eyes shimmering with tears she refused to hide. Rose approached her quietly. "Madam Principal," she said softly, "yesterday I saw you as a cleaner. Today I see you as a mirror." Amara smiled. "And what do you see in that mirror, Rose?" Rose looked down. "Myself, proud, but learning." Amara touched her shoulder. "Then you are already changing." Later that evening, the campus lights twinkled as dusk fell. Amara sat under a jacaranda tree outside the hall. The petals had formed a purple carpet around her feet. Kofi approached, holding two. She looked at her reflection in the glass. For the first time, she wondered, is humility just another form of pride when you start believing you're the most humble of all? Her late father's words echoed in her mind. "Amara, when people begin to praise you, listen to the silence between their claps." That's where truth hides. A month later, a documentary crew from the United States arrived to film Africa's Educator of the Year. They wanted drama, the rags to riches moment. The confrontation replayed with actors, the emotional tears. The director said, "We'll make it cinematic, inspirational, from cleaner to leader." Amara's smile faded. "Cleaner to leader? That's not the story. I was never a cleaner, and those who are, they lead in their own way. Don't simplify dignity into pity. The director blinked. But it'll go viral. I'm not here to go viral, Amara replied quietly. I'm here to go honest. The crew reluctantly agreed to film the real school. No makeup, no retakes, no acting. Just daily life. When the documentary aired, it surprised everyone. It wasn't glamorous, it was human. Children reading under trees, teachers laughing with janitors, and Amara sweeping the floor beside students during service hour. The world loved it, but in the shadows of that success, jealousy began to grow among some staff who felt left behind. Peter, now humbled but still nursing pride, whispered to another teacher, "She acts holy, but she's still human. Let's see how long her kindness lasts." One morning, a sealed envelope appeared on Amara's desk. It was unsigned. Written in careful block letters, "Dr. Njeri, you preach equality but live in privilege. You sit in the big office while others sweat. Your humility is just another kind of pride. The world will soon see the truth." Amara sat still, reading it twice. Then she smiled faintly and whispered, "Perhaps they are right." Instead of calling a meeting or finding the sender, she called for a full staff gathering in the hall. Everyone expected an announcement about the upcoming awards ceremony. Instead, Amara stood before them holding the anonymous letter. "Someone in this room wrote this," she began softly, "and I thank them." Murmurs rippled through the hall. She continued, "Humility isn't about looking small. It's about being teachable. I too have blind spots. So today I ask each of you, how can I serve better?" Silence. Then Kofi stood. "You already serve us all, madam." She shook her head. "Then I have failed to make service visible." Rose raised her hand timidly. "Sometimes you walk too far ahead." "We can't always keep up." Amara nodded slowly. "Then I must walk slower." That day, the air in Umoja shifted again. Not from authority, but from shared humanity. A few weeks later, the unexpected happened. A popular tabloid published a headline, "The Principal at the Gate, a Lie? Insider Claims Viral Heroin Exploited Staff." The article twisted facts, misquoted statements, and used old photos to imply corruption. Social media erupted. Some defended her fiercely, others mocked. Sponsors froze their donations. The board panicked. Benson called an emergency meeting. "Dr. Amara, this is serious. The ministry wants an explanation. Should we hire a PR firm?" Amara shook her head. "No, truth needs no agents. Let them come and see." The next day, she called a press conference. Not in the auditorium, but under the same jacaranda tree where she used to read to children years ago. When reporters arrived, they expected a speech. Instead, Amara stood before the camera holding a broom. "While they wrote stories," she said softly, sweeping the dusty ground, "I continued my work." She looked up at the cameras. "I am not a saint. I am a servant, and servants do not defend themselves. They serve." There was silence, then applause. The video of that simple act, the principal sweeping under the tree, became more powerful than any PR campaign. Months later, the tabloid issued a retraction. The truth had outlived the rumor. Amara was invited to speak at the African Union Education Summit in Addis Ababa. She stood on the grand stage, facing leaders from across the continent. "I stand here not as a success story," she began, "but as a warning. We cannot change systems if we do not change our spirits. The gate that locks others out also traps us inside. Open your gates." The audience rose in thunderous applause. That evening, as her plane descended back into Nairobi, Amara looked down at the city lights, like scattered candles burning in the dark. She smiled. "The light is not mine," she whispered. "It belongs to everyone who chooses to see." The rains returned to Nairobi, steady, cleansing, unhurried. They painted the city in silver reflections and whispered secrets through the trees. Inside Umoja International Academy, laughter echoed again, papers rustled, and learning resumed its steady heartbeat. But for Amara, a new storm was forming, one not of thunder but of decisions. One afternoon, as Amara reviewed student reports in her office, Benson Oluwash walked in holding a letter sealed with the national crest. "It came directly from the president's office," he said, his voice a mixture of pride and disbelief. Amara raised her brow, carefully breaking the seal. Inside was a formal invitation. "Dr. Amara Njeri is hereby nominated to serve as the Cabinet Secretary for Education, Republic of Kenya." Benson grinned. You've done it, Amara. From a principal to a national reformer, the country needs you. For a long moment, Amara said nothing. Her eyes drifted to the window, to the jacaranda tree swaying in the wind. Benson, she said softly, does the country need me? Or does it need what Umoja represents? He frowned. What's the difference? A tree is not the forest, she murmured. That evening, the school buzzed with the news. Teachers whispered excitedly in the corridors. She'll be the youngest minister in the nation's history. She can bring our values to every classroom in Kenya. Finally, someone who understands education. But others were uneasy. Kofi, always quiet, sat at the gate deep in thought. When Amara approached him on her evening walk, he stood quickly. You heard? She asked, smiling faintly. Yes, madam. Everyone has. The nation is celebrating already. She nodded slowly. And you? What do you think? He hesitated. Madam, when you walk into that office, who will sweep the courtyard? Amara smiled sadly. Maybe someone better. He shook his head. No one sweeps like you, with peace in their eyes. His words lingered long after she left. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. The room felt too quiet, the clock too loud. Her mind replayed the faces of her students, laughing, learning, healing. Could she leave them? She rose and walked barefoot to her window. The rain had stopped. The moonlight fell over the courtyard like a blessing. She whispered, If I rise too high, let me still remember the dust beneath my feet. 2 days later, she was invited to a private dinner with a group of ministers and wealthy donors at the Serena Hotel. As she entered, the room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Cameras flashed subtly, though this wasn't an official event. The education minister leaned forward with a charming smile. Dr. Amara, your story has inspired the world. But inspiration is not enough. Join us, and you can shape policy, allocate budgets, appoint heads, real power. A donor added, We'll fund 10 more Umoja schools under your name. You'll have your own foundation. Just sign our agreement. Amara sipped her water slowly, listening. Then she asked quietly, Will those schools be free for children who can't pay? The donor hesitated. Well, sustainability requires fees. And will your foundation hire teachers from the same communities it serves? Of course, but with oversight from our partners abroad. Amara set her glass down. Then you don't want Umoja. You want ownership. Her calm words sliced through the table's comfort like a blade. Power without purpose, she said softly. It is just vanity wearing a suit. She rose to leave. Cameras captured her departure, but her eyes were distant, somewhere between peace and sorrow. The following week, she was scheduled to meet the president. That morning, the entire school gathered in the courtyard. Students held handmade signs, Our Principal for the Nation, Umoja to Kenya. Rose handed her a bouquet. Kofi stood silently beside the gate, his eyes glistening. When Amara stepped forward to speak, her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of love. My children, my colleagues, she began. You taught me more than any office could. You taught me that leadership isn't standing above others, it's kneeling beside them. She paused, looking at the faces before her. Young, old, hopeful. If I accept this position, it must not be for pride or fame or comfort. It must be for service. And service, she smiled softly, begins at the gate. A hush fell over the courtyard. She continued. So, before I decide, I will spend today here, not as your principal, but as your servant. She picked up a broom and began sweeping the dusty tiles. The same gesture she had made months before. Teachers joined her. Students too. Soon the entire school was cleaning, laughing, singing, and when the sun set, Amara stood once more beneath the jacaranda tree, whispering to herself, Now I know my answer. At the State House the next morning, the president smiled warmly. Dr. Amara, we've followed your journey with admiration. The nation awaits your leadership. She bowed respectfully. Your Excellency, I am honored. But I must decline. A stunned silence. You refuse a cabinet seat? He asked, incredulous. I refuse to leave the ground that grows the change, she said gently. Policies start in offices, but transformation starts in hearts. I belong where hearts are. The president leaned back, studying her. You realize what you're turning down? Amara nodded. Yes, sir. And I also realize what I'd lose if I accepted. After a long pause, the president smiled faintly. Then Kenya is lucky to have someone who knows the difference. Months later, the ministry announced a new initiative, the Umoja Educational Reform Act, inspired by Amara's model. Every public school in Kenya would adopt her principles: equality, mentorship, and service-based leadership. Amara was offered an honorary advisory role, but she continued working from her small office in Umoja. Kofi now trained guards from other schools in hospitality with dignity. Rose coordinated outreach programs for orphaned students. Peter led teacher empathy workshops across the region, and every Friday, during the Circle of Umoja, children still gathered under the jacaranda tree, laughing, confessing, forgiving. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, a young reporter approached Amara. "Dr. Njeri," she asked, "you could have led the entire nation. Don't you ever regret staying here?" Amara smiled, watching students chase butterflies across the field. "My dear," she said, "a nation is only as great as its classrooms." "I lead every time one of these children chooses kindness over pride," the reporter hesitated. "Then what do you call what you've built here?" Amara looked toward the gate, now wide open. Sunlight spilling through. "I call it freedom." Years later, the world would remember the day the principal was stopped at the gate, not as a story of humiliation, but as a parable of grace. Statues would be built, awards named, and books written. But Amara herself would never attend those ceremonies. She preferred the laughter of children to the applause of crowds. And every morning, as dawn painted Nairobi gold, she would still walk the same red earth path to school, sandals dusted, eyes steady, the woman who once was mistaken for a cleaner, now the quiet architect of a nation's moral renewal. At the gate, Kofi, older now, his beard gray, would always stand to greet her. "Good morning, madam," and she would smile. "Good morning, my brother." Then together they'd open the gate, as they always had, for everyone. Years had passed since that fateful day in the marble halls of Zenith Capital. The story of Amara Kalu, the young woman once humiliated for her skin, her accent, and her modest clothes, had become more than a headline. It had become a legend whispered in classrooms, boardrooms, and bustling African markets. What began as an act of prejudice had turned into a movement that redefined what it meant to be African in the modern world. The cameras that once captured her pain now filmed her triumph, not as revenge, but as rebirth. The city of Lagos had changed. So had Nairobi, so had Accra, and so had Johannesburg. Across the continent, something invisible yet powerful had awakened, a quiet dignity. Born not from rebellion, but from remembering who we are. In the heart of Lagos, in a tall glass tower surrounded by green gardens and murals painted by local artists, stood the headquarters of the Amara Kalu Foundation for Dignity and Innovation. Its motto, "We rise by restoring worth," inside. The walls were lined with portraits of women and men who had been overlooked. The artisans, farmers, street traders, young tech dreamers, and teachers who had faced rejection but refused to surrender. Amara's foundation offered them not charity, but tools, mentorship, investment, and storytelling. In one corner, a young woman from Ghana demonstrated her solar-powered irrigation system. In another, a Rwandan coder taught children to design apps in their native language. And in the main hall, above a golden staircase, a quote from Amara herself was engraved. "They tried to make me small, but I learned dignity cannot be measured by status, only by heart." Media across Africa began referring to the transformation as the Dignity Renaissance. Companies that once overlooked African talent began signing diversity and cultural equity pledges. Schools introduced new history modules on African excellence. Universities named scholarships after Amara, and her speeches were broadcast in multiple languages: Hausa, Swahili, Zulu, Yoruba, Twi, and English. But Amara never sought fame. She lived quietly, often walking through crowded markets without security or luxury. She said, "If I cannot sit with the people who raised me, then my success is hollow." Her humility drew more hearts than her wealth ever could. In Nairobi, a documentary filmmaker asked an old market woman what Amara's story meant to her. The woman smiled and said, "She reminded us that the African soul cannot be fired or suspended. It can only be silenced if we let it," and she refused. That simple statement became a viral quote across social media. Hashtags like African Dignity, Amara Legacy, and The New Africa trended across nations, even in diaspora communities, from Atlanta to London, from Toronto to Kingston. Young Africans began sharing their own stories of identity, worth, and pride. They saw in Amara's journey not just a story of one woman, but the story of their people. In her final public address, standing beneath the giant baobab tree where her father once told her stories of courage, Amara spoke softly to the crowd and to the millions watching live online. I was once told that I didn't belong, but the truth is, belonging is not something you are given. It is something you build stone by stone, truth by truth. Africa is not waiting for validation. Africa is the validation. Her voice trembled slightly as the wind carried her words into the golden dusk. Children sat cross-legged in front. Elders nodded, eyes glistening with memory. That day, even the sky seemed to hold its breath. After Amara's passing years later, her foundation continued under her protege, Kwesi Okoro, a Ghanaian educator she had mentored from the beginning. He often told his team, Amara didn't teach us how to win. She taught us how to stay human while winning, and every year, on the anniversary of her stand at Zenith Capital, the foundation hosted the Amara Day of Dignity. Thousands attended, from CEOs to street vendors, all sharing their stories of resilience. Across cities, murals appeared with her image surrounded by light, wearing a humble Ankara dress, smiling, not as a savior, but as one of us. Children grew up hearing her name alongside Mandela, Wangari Maathai, and Nkrumah, heroes who fought not with weapons, but with worth. And so, dear listener, the story of Amara Kalu is not about revenge. It is about redemption through remembrance. It tells us that power without humility corrupts, but humility with courage rebuilds nations. The people who once mocked her now teach her principles in leadership workshops. The companies that dismissed her now quote her speeches, and the continent that once questioned its place in the world now stands taller, not because the world finally noticed, but because it finally noticed itself. In every African who walks with quiet confidence, in every woman who refuses to shrink, in every young dreamer who builds without apology, Amara lives on. This was the story of Amara Kalu, a tale of dignity reborn and pride restored. If this story touched your heart, remember, every time you share it, you help another soul rise from doubt to destiny. Subscribe to African Black Tales for more powerful stories of justice, redemption, and the unstoppable African spirit. And stay tuned for our next episode, where a humble fisherman from Ghana discovers a secret that could change his entire village and challenge the price of greed itself. Because every tale we tell keeps Africa alive.